Tomorrow marks the third anniversary of the massacre at the Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh. An avowed white supremacist killed 11 worshipers that day. Ahead of that grim remembrance, the American Jewish Committee has released a report on the state of anti-Semitism in America. Among the report's key findings, 1 in 4 American Jews say they've been targets of anti-Semitism in the last 12 months. 4 in 10 American Jews have changed their behavior out of fear. 4 out of 10 of all Americans have personally witnessed anti-Semitic incidents, and 82% of American Jews say anti-Semitism has risen over the last 5 years, while only 44% of the general public believes that to be the case. And joining us now to help unpack this report are Sarah Van Loon, Regional Director for the American Jewish Committee in Chicago, and Holly Huffnagle, the American Jewish Committee's Director for Combating Anti-Semitism, who is joining us now from Washington. Welcome both of you to Chicago tonight.
Thank you.
So Holly, I'll start with you. Can we boil down what might be behind this rise in anti-Semitic behavior over the last few years?
I think there's several factors, unfortunately, and no reasons justify anti-Semitism. But we're at a moment right now in American history, I think, where we're seeing rising economic uncertainty, where Jews are blamed or scapegoated. We're seeing a political divisiveness in our country, a lack of trust in government and in our democracy. We're seeing a fading legacy of the Holocaust, where young people today aren't aware of where unchecked anti-Semitism can lead. We are seeing more sources of anti-Semitism today, not just from the far right, white supremacists anti-Semitism, which was what happened in Pittsburgh, but from religious extremists, from the extreme political left. And all of this is really, coming to a head online and on social media, where it is spreading exponentially, and there aren't those gatekeepers and fact checkers. So unfortunately, these reasons together are contributing to this rise in anti-Jewish hate.
Yeah, and when you see this kind of insecurity, unfortunately, you see scapegoats, and it always kind of goes down this road. Sarah Van Loon, what's the situation here in Chicago and Illinois? Have we seen a similar rise, and do Chicago area Jewish population feel the same kind of fear?
I would say yes, they do see a similar and face a similar type of fear here in the Midwest. Happily, if you will, I would say American Jews here in the broader Midwest region feel more safe than they do perhaps as they did in May of this year, but still greatly concerning. If you drill into the survey findings for just the Midwest alone, American Jews in the last 12 months increasingly are removing outward Jewish objects. They're not wearing their Star of David, they're not putting on their yarmulke. They're in fact avoiding more places where they can be identified as Jews, not going to synagogue, not going to Jewish community centers. So while we are feeling a little bit more confident than we did this spring, still greatly concerning.
Yes, kind of a scary silencing effect here. And that survey mentioned also online, it's kind of rearing its head there. Holly Huffnagle, you mentioned it's coming from both political extremes. From the very far right, we've seen obvious examples of that with Charlottesville and, as we mentioned, Pittsburgh, but also on the far left. So what characterizes the anti-Semitism that comes from the far left versus the far right?
So I think the far right anti-Semitism is easy for us to identify. It is the neo-Nazis marching in Charlottesville, shouting, "Jews will not replace us." It's what happened in Pittsburgh. It's what happened in Poway in California when a Jewish woman was killed. So we see anti-Semitism from the extreme political right. In fact, the majority of American Jews see the far right as the most serious threat in the United States. However, this year, we've actually seen an increase in American Jews' perception that the extreme political left poses a greater threat than it has in past years. And I really do think we can point to what happened in our country in May in 2021, when Jews were attacked in the streets in Los Angeles and in New York. And for 72% of American Jews who had heard about these attacks against the community and in the United States and around the world, 72% of them felt less safe as a Jewish person in America. And yet the general public, the majority of general public, weren't even aware of these attacks. And I think that's where we're seeing some of the rise in the threat from the extreme political left as well.
And Sarah Van Loon, at the other end of the coin, you see comments like we heard today from Chicago's police union chief comparing vaccine mandates to the Holocaust or to Nazi Germany. What do those kind of overly hyperbolic comparisons, how do they affect anti-Semitic behavior?
Well, in my opinion, it emboldens them because it diminishes the impact of the Holocaust, and it is its own version of Holocaust inversion and denialism by saying that something that has to deal with public health and the safety of others, to comparing that to mass genocide is completely unacceptable. And so it cheapens, I would say, a horrific experience in the Jewish communal memory. We still have so many survivors, particularly here in Chicago. So to have the leader of the police union so carelessly make such remarks, it's fully unacceptable.
Holly Huffnagle, we've talked about the problem here, especially this year, especially over the last 5 years. From your vantage, what are the solutions?
So I think it has to start with recognition. There's been a small glimpse of hope this year. More Americans are at least aware of the term anti-Semitism. Last year, we found that 46% of Americans really weren't familiar with the word anti-Semitism. That number is down to 34% this year. That's still 1 in 3 Americans who don't know what anti-Semitism is. So we have education to do in that space. But recognition is the first step, and recognizing that anti-Semitism is not a Jewish problem. It's a societal problem. It's a reflection on the health of our society, and it's up to really, non-Jews and all Americans to push back and combat it.
And Sarah Van Loon, how do you deal with the influence of social media, where it's sort of the Wild West, and you just see so many dark and anti-Semitic statements circulating on social media because people can kind of hide in anonymity? What about that?
So locally, we're working with our interfaith leaders to promote it on a community basis, building coalitions, helping to break down walls and build bridges with those of other faiths and ethnicities so that we can demystify the other, so that some of that dark hate, as you described it on the internet, doesn't have a place or a community to be fed on to begin with. So we look to partner with others to promote understanding, to promote goodwill, but we're also calling on social media companies to take action, to fulfill the promises that they put forth in their codes of conduct. And I know AJC has worked extensively with a number of social media companies, including to strengthen their moderation effects. And so we need to continue that valuable and important work.
All right, well, very important discussion here, and our thanks to Holly Huffnagle and Sarah Van Loon. Thank you so much.